Hey guys, how you doing? A couple of weeks ago on my Facebook page, Rod and Paddle, I wrote a little piece about fishing reel gear ratios. What's a gear ratio? The gear ratio is that little scribble bit there where it says 6.5 to 1. Hopefully you know what that means. But if you don't know what it means, it's not a big problem, right? But it is something that you need to know about. So a gear ratio is like in your car, and first gear or low gear in your car is really good for getting your car up hills. But if you want to do the speed limit on the highway, it's not much good for you. So that's why you've got fourth gear or fifth gear or even sixth or seventh gear, right? But the higher the number, the higher the gear ratio, the faster it allows your car to move. But if you tried to start off with that higher gear ratio, give it a try, you'll find that your car won't want to move, or it'll stall and stop. So a low ratio reel. So all reels, spinning reels or casting reels, they're all got gear ratios, and they're all stamped on them or stenciled on them somewhere. So that one there, 5.3 to 1, that's a fairly low ratio reel. So what I would have called a moderate ratio reel until recent years is this one here, 6.5 to 1. This one here, one that I'm just starting to play with now, is an extremely high speed reel, 9.3 to 1. Okay, so what's the deal? The way it works is the ratio on the reel, got to get off the car a bit, right? So the ratio, the way it works is, so this one's 5.3 to 1, right? So for every one turn of the handle, it spins around the spool 5.3 times. Okay, so for every one full turn of the handle, that goes around 5.3 times. Okay, so with a spinning reel, this one's 6.5 to 1. For every one full turn of the handle, the spool rotates 6.5 times. Okay, so obviously the higher the ratio, so for this one here, 9.3 to 1. So for this one here, one full turn of the handle rotates the spool 9.3 times. So this will pull in nearly 30% more line than this will for one turn of the handle. Okay. However, it's not quite as simple as that, right? Because it also depends on how much line you've got on your spool and what that diameter is with it packed full of line, right? Because the greater the diameter of the line spooled up, that'll also increase the speed at which everything comes in at. That's gives you your inches of return. So how does that work for you? So simply put, a low speed reel is really good for cranking something. So it's very much like your car, back onto the car again, it's very much like your car going up a hill rather than along the highway. So it really helps you crank something in, pull something in, right? So having a low speed reel is really, really good for that. I've found over the years that I've gone away from using low speed reels on the kayak, and as I said, now I'm starting to experiment with this thing, which is 9.3 to 1, right? Now normally you wouldn't do that, but the kayak lends itself towards wanting to go for a high speed reel. Why is that? Okay, so forgetting trolling for a minute, and forgetting if you're anchored and stationary. So we're talking about a moving kayak. So whether it's moving really slowly or whether you're in quite a current or a wind and you're moving, right? If you're fishing to your best ability, and that's usually out front of you or out to the side of you, right? So in other words, less likely to spook the fish because you haven't run over the thing, right? You cast out. So here's the scenario: you're moving along gently, like, so we're not talking about a great clip here, but you're moving regardless. You cast out, your lure lands in front of you, and then you're forever cranking the reel, getting it in. Okay, and the reason for that is because your line's continually going slack because you're overrunning it. All right, that's where the higher ratio comes into it. A fish grabs your lure. It's one of those lucky days, eh? A fish grabs your lure and decides to do a run with the thing, right? So your kayak and your arms, your rod, your line, the whole lot, you're one big shock absorber, all right? So it's not like being stuck on the deck of a boat or on the land, right? All of a sudden you've got this massive amount, everything's giving, the kayak's giving, it's moving and tilting, you're giving, your rod's giving, your line's giving, everything's giving, right? Another reason why it's really important to be able to keep the pressure up on the line, right? Just as an aside, that's one of the reasons why I prefer to use braid than particularly fluoro or a copolymer mono, for example, as well, because they've got a lot more stretch in them. So that just adds to the problem. So except in certain circumstances, I'll generally always use braid with a leader on a kayak because it helps with hook set, because the amount of give that everything's got. So going back to it, right, you've cast out, right, and all of a sudden you're working overtime because you've now hooked this fish, and what's happened is your fish is actually dragging your kayak towards it. It's turned it as well, right? Even worse, now the wind's caught up with you, right, because it always starts to blow just as you catch something, and it's like, oh my god, right? And so you're having to work overtime. I bet you've experienced this, right? And that's why this, which I used to, at 6.5 to 1, which I used to use all the time, is now relegated to being one of my cranking winch type reels, right? And the average reel I use now in a casting reel would be 7 to 1, or 7.5 to 1, which a few years back I would describe as a high speed reel. And as I said, I'm just starting to play with this thing, which is 9.3 to 1. All for those reasons. So hopefully there's something there for you to think about. There's a couple of things you need to know. When you use a high speed reel, you'll get a reduction in your drag. Right? That's just a common trait of all high speed reels. So anything 7 to 1, 7.5, 8, 8.3, 9, 9.3, you'll all find that they've got a reduced amount of drag to something that's got higher torque. The lower ratio is a cranking reel, and the higher ratio is not so good for cranking. And that leads to another thing. So if you get yourself a higher ratio reel, get yourself either an aftermarket handle or get a reel that comes with a larger handle. Right, the larger handle is going to help overcome some of the cranking problems that you would experience if you had a reel with a small center to center on the handle than a reel with a larger center to center, because this allows you to crank it a bit harder, right, even though it's a higher ratio. So just something to consider if you do go for a higher ratio reel, whether it be a casting reel like this, right, get a larger handle, spinning reel, get a larger handle, right? It's really important, because otherwise you'll find that the high ratio reel just won't suit you. Anyway, probably a good time to think about hitting the water and actually turning some of this talk into something meaningful and productive, which is getting out there catching a fish or two. So tight lines, hope to see you on the water one day, and stay safe. See you later. Thanks for watching.